I think when we look at migration, we see social capital issues sort of on steroids, or they're very powerfully on display. And in a non-war, non-crisis type of situations, that's the normal processes in migration. We know from empirical work that's been done on this, very careful empirical work, that, and it's even from our own observations, that people tend to migrate from very non-random places to non-random places. It's not just hordes of people who go. Migrating is a very existential decision to leave, probably on a one-way ticket in effect, the community that you've come from, to find a new place, to strike out on your own, to go and live a very different life in a very different place. And so precisely because it's so laden with risk and fraught with possibilities of disaster, in the case of a boat sinking halfway between Cuba and Florida, or across the Mediterranean, or other graphic examples we have in more recent times, social networks are crucial to how that process gets managed. And in a more orthodox kind of environment, it's all about social networks. It's all about social capital, because you don't randomly migrate. You migrate to places where you will know the people that are going to greet you, that can welcome you, that can offer you shelter, that can offer you a basic livelihood, can offer you a basic set of financial tools for being able to get access to credit, for example. Here in the United States, we have the phenomena of Chinatowns and Koreatowns and other very clear ethnic enclaves that are where solidarity is formed, where people can feel some semblance of security and normality by being surrounded by people that look like them, talk like them, and then can, in an instrumental sense, overtly help them to navigate this new world that they're in, help them to fill out the right forms, to get their kids into good schools, to be able to get healthcare when they need it. All of those very elementary things are still in the very earliest stages managed and navigated through our social networks. That's still true even for people that are coming in through the World Bank. We have a whole set of associational networks that are all set up to help people do that, because it's not obvious how your partner will function here in Washington. So we realize that's a considerable source of anxiety, and so we set up a social mechanism to be able to help people deal with that. So that's very normal. But when it comes to policy around migration, certainly in these more graphic instances of state failure, and not just hundreds but thousands or tens of thousands of migrants, that obviously overwhelms any informal social institutional arrangement. There has to, though those processes remain, we need to have some complementarity between what becomes official policy, but that official policy itself needs to recognize that migrants, even under the most dire circumstances, perhaps even more so under dire circumstances, because the risk is so high, will be very much driven by their semblance of the social networks that they can construct that will help them to manage the risk and vulnerability that they encounter. So not just in the process of migrating, but the crucial first few months and years are when people are in a new space, where linguistically, legally, they can be in a very precarious situation of just literally not being able to figure out how to get money to pay for groceries, not being able to help figure out how to enroll their children in school. All those sort of things just need to be sorted out, and one can have policies in the abstract for doing all of that, but if we want it to work really well, then there's got to be some formal system that underpins it. It's got to be well implemented, and it's got to take seriously the social component to all of this, because in the worst situation, you atomize people, you take them away from their own people, you put them in designated sort of real estate, or in the worst, Australia's own awful cases, putting them on islands in the middle of nowhere, and imagining that somehow this is either a sensible or minimally humane response to these problems. It just isn't. And so the imperatives don't go away, because the more we develop, the more we integrate, the more these pressures are going to happen independently of war and state failure. So it's a problem of development success as well as a problem of development failure when a human tragedy. So we have to have a strategy for this, whether we like it or not. And we can play catch up against very difficult circumstances, or we can try and get ahead of this and try and think about it more proactively up front. And some basic literacy, as it were, with regards to how migration processes work, and especially the social foundations on which most of those rest, I think would be a pretty first order issue that should be under examination when policies and practices are being articulated.